News of the day.
Mr. Zimmerman, have you made a decision as to whether or not you want to testify in this case?
With values that never die.
There are certainly a lot of controversies or scandals brewing right now when it comes to the Obama administration.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Dealing with the federal government is not always high-tech, and it's not always user-friendly.
The stories that matter.
This is a massive escalation in the tension here in Egypt.
The issues that count.
I don't know why the media tries to make this into a sensation. We have never hidden the fact that we supply Syria with weapons.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
He's got the red, white, blue flying high on the farm. Semper Fi tattooed on his left arm. Spend a little more in the store for a tag.
Welcome to American Heartland. I am your host, Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. Thank you for spending some time with us. We are going to be discussing all of the hot issues of the week. And this week, a word has been uttered that many have tried to avoid. And that's not the R word, racism or racist. It's the I word, impeachment. This week, Congress held hearings asking the very simple question: has the President of the United States exceeded his constitutionally designated powers? In other words, is President Obama dictating by fiat? Is he issuing laws willy-nilly without the authority of Congress and without this, within the confines of the Constitution? These are questions that the House Judiciary Committee wanted to ask, wanted to probe, and they got a series of legal scholars and they asked them key questions about the president's actions and whether or not those actions are borne by the Constitution, whether or not those actions are constitutional. Now, some might say, well, this is merely an exercise in one big nothing, because if the Democrats control the Senate, there is no way that this president can be impeached by that body. He may at best be impeached by the House, which amounts to not very much. So what is this all about? Well, I have to say it was a really important moment, because regardless of what happens next, it does a few things. Number one, this committee hearing sends a clear message to the Democrats and to the President of the United States to stop issuing legislation without the support of Congress, to stop issuing or changing legislation without the support of Congress. It sends a clear warning. We may or may not be able to take this to the ultimate nuclear option, which is to impeach a president. But we are at last beginning to look at it, and this is the Republicans' way of saying, if you continue to go down this road, there will be consequences. And also, it is to be borne in mind that the frustration and anger at this president is growing across the country. And now it is also entering into the minds and hearts of his former supporters, even those in the media. So we don't know exactly where this series of questioning will ultimately lead. What will happen, for example, if the Republicans gain control of the Senate in the midterm elections in 2014? These questions are extremely important because they are a warning to the Democrats not to do this any further, and they are also laying the groundwork for possible impeachment proceedings if the public is pushed too far and if the Republicans win the Senate in the midterm elections, which is increasingly looking very, very likely. So this week, the I word has been bandied about, and you can listen for yourself, as at first congressmen who were in those meetings were reluctant to use the word, and then they just began to use them as though it's saying McDonald's or Coca-Cola. Roll it, Brittany.
What can you do? I'm often asked this. You got to go up there and you just impeach him. Or you go up there, you just impeach the president, or you go up there and you just cut funds off, you shut everything down.
If a president is ignoring entire categories of the law, whether it be immigration, marijuana, mandatory minimum, the ACA, what is the remedy for the legislative branch?
The next recourse is, I think, as Mr. Rosencrantz said, the word that we don't like to say in this committee, and I'm not about to utter here in this particular hearing.
We've also talked about the I word, impeachment, which, again, I don't think would get past the Senate in the current climate. Am I missing anything? Is there anything else we can do?
So the dreaded I word, impeachment. What is significant about all this is that it is very clear that you have such a high level of disgust and concern at the president's actions that now there are a growing number of members of Congress who are going to discuss this impeachment possibility. They're going to start to lay the groundwork for it if necessary. And they're starting to muster all the arguments in defense of a possible act of impeachment. Very significant during this hearing, there is a key professor, a liberal professor by the name of Jonathan Turley. He is actually a professor of law at the George Washington University Law School. And he essentially has stated unequivocally that the president's actions, according to his expertise, a wide area of expertise, and this is a man, by the way, who was lauded by the left, not just now increasingly by the right. He basically said that the president is, in fact, exceeding his authority as given to him by the Constitution. Roll it, Brittany.
Professor Turley, the Constitution's system of separated powers is not simply about stopping one branch of government from usurping another. It's about protecting the liberty of Americans from the dangers of concentrated government power. How does the president's unilateral modification of acts of Congress affect both the balance of power between the political branches and the liberty interests of the American people?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The danger is quite severe. The problem with what the president is doing is that he's not simply posing a danger to the constitutional system. He's becoming the very danger the Constitution was designed to avoid. That is, the concentration of power in branch. This Newtonian orbit that the three branches exist in is a delicate one, but it is designed to prevent this type of concentration. There's two trends going on which should be of equal concern to all members of Congress. One is we've had the radical expansion of presidential powers under both President Bush and President Obama. We have what many once called an imperial presidency model of largely unchecked authority. And with that trend, we also have the continued rise of this fourth branch. We have agencies that are now quite large that issue regulations. The Supreme Court said recently that agencies could actually define their own or interpret their own jurisdiction.
So this professor is very, very, very astute because he's really put his finger on the issue. And that is increasingly with a regulatory state that is out of control and an imperial presidency, individual liberties are slowly being crushed. That is what is at stake here. As power is concentrated in Washington, D.C., and especially as power is concentrated in unaccountable regulatory bodies that once created are very, very difficult to dismember. The result of this is that individual liberties are gradually dimmed until they are completely eliminated. One thing is very clear. The Obama youth that previously saw this man as their great hope for the future has understood now something very clearly. Not only is he not their great hope, but he is presiding over an administration that is a direct threat to their individual liberty. Not just our individual liberty, but the youth are keenly aware, especially, that we are crossing frontiers that have never been crossed before in how intrusive the government is. And the president has not only presided over this intrusive government when he was supposed to be one that was supposed to make the government more transparent and more accountable. He's not only presided over the intrusiveness, he's been a cause of an excess of intrusiveness. He's justified the intrusiveness. He has supported the wide-ranging NSA surveillance program instead of, as many of his supporters thought he would do, bringing an end to it or curtailing it significantly. He supported its wide expansion. And now when it comes to Obamacare, he not only supported, obviously, the enactment of the law, but he was willing to change it at his discretion whenever he thought a piece of it didn't suit his particular interest in that particular week. So the public has seen very clearly that the president's grasp of his office is revolutionary. It's not quite like any other president. I mean, some might say, well, didn't George Bush expand his prerogative? Yes, he did, but mostly within the context of 9/11, when the nation supported him, the nation felt, well, we were attacked, and they felt that it was an unusual, extraordinary situation, that we had to get a handle on this war on terror. But now it doesn't make any sense. It seems to be government expansion for its own sake, government intrusiveness for its own sake. And there's something else that has happened to Obama. He has lost the trust of the American people, even his former supporters, because there's now a whiff about him, the whiff of arbitrary rule. You cannot say unequivocally, this is the law of the land and we will not change it and we'll fight for it till the very end. And then, subsequently, in a press conference, insist that you can tell insurance companies what to do at any moment. That you can tell employers what to do at any moment. The employer mandate is in. No, the employer mandate is out. Insurance companies are required to abide by Obamacare. No, they're not required to abide by Obamacare. Well, which is it? And this president has lost his stature, not only as a man of trust, but also as one who understands the American Constitution, the American way of doing things. In this country, we believe that power is corrupt, and therefore it must be checked with great vigilance. That's why there are the three branches of power. That's why very often some people say, well, the American public is schizophrenic. They'll vote for one party to be, say, hold on to the executive branch, so the Democrats have the executive branch, and another party to have part of the legislative branch. How does that make any sense? Well, to Americans, it makes perfect sense. It's part of a system of checks and balances that holds power in its place, that keeps it accountable. And all of this is a fervent, determined attempt to preserve what Americans hold most dear, and that is individual liberty. Remember this. It is not slavery that has to be explained, because the condition of the world is usually that of some kind of slavery, some kind of infringement of individual liberties. What needs to be explained historically always is, how is liberty created? And Americans have a system of checks and balances that has created individual liberty. But that system must be protected and preserved. It must be respected. But this administration is running roughshod over our most sacred heritage, the Constitution, the systems of checks and balances, and a disciplined, controlled exercise of executive power. This president has lost his way, and it is our job to tell him, you are not going to transform this country into some kind of dictatorship. We will fight for our individual liberties. You are listening to Dr. Grace, upholding values that will never, ever die.
we'd all love to see the plan. You asked me for a contribution. Well, you know.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Welcome back to American Heartland. This is Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. Well, this week we are seeing startling numbers for the Obama presidency. The youth is turning on him. In addition, it doesn't look like the youth is signing up for Obamacare, so he's got huge problems with the youth. In addition, Hispanics are fleeing the president. They've been a bedrock of his support. So they're beginning to turn to. Those are two pivotal constituencies. But what's happening is something even bigger than any specific group turning on the president. What's happening now is many of the stories that folks weren't willing to look at, those who admired him greatly, now they have to look at. The reason is it's clear for everyone to see that he doesn't tell the truth. Nobody can deny that. One of the great strengths that this president had was that the majority of Americans believed that whether they agreed with his policies or not, they believed that he was an honest man. But what's happened recently is that those numbers have shifted. Americans no longer believe that he is honest. In other words, they're convinced that we have a liar in the White House. So once we have that concession, and many of us on the right have been saying for a long, long time, this man is a liar. He doesn't just lie about small things. He lies about big things, important things, key things, things that are not just the occasional white lie. Massive lies, like Benghazi, for example. I mean, not telling the truth about how an American ambassador died in the early days after it happened. That's not a small lie. That's a mammoth lie. Well, Americans have seen that the president is willing to lie on really, really big things. And one of the things that nobody can deny he clearly lied about. He said over and over again, if you like your doctor, you can keep it, period. If you like your health care plan, you can keep it, period. And now we know that he had discussed with advisors that, that was just tactical. That was just strategic. That was just one way of getting Obamacare passed into law. He didn't mean to uphold that. Now, this recognition by the American public that he lies about big things is shattering this presidency. It's cracking it open. It's not just that Obamacare itself is a disaster. It's the president himself who is now no longer seen as credible or trustworthy. This means for all of us who have been asking a lot of questions, we have a new opportunity to raise those questions again. Questions that were previously dismissed as mean-spirited, nutty, way out there. So Benghazi is being examined. We know that. The IRS scandal is being examined. We know that. And the constitutionality of the president's activities is being examined. And now we can return to another issue. An issue that keeps cropping up. Who is Barack Obama? Remember that there is a segment of the population who is convinced that this president is not who he says he is. And that doesn't mean just lying about policy. It means fundamental lies. The public has asked this question. Was he even born in the United States? And the media, for the most part, has poo-pooed this. And they've tried to label all those who raise that question as extremists, as so-called birthers. Well, if you're a fan of the show, you know that Sheriff Joe Arpaio and his team, headed by Lieutenant Mike Zullo, have undertaken a massive investigation into the birth certificate. And according to their forensic examination, they have concluded that the long-form birth certificate that the president presented is a fraud. It's a fake. And more is going to come based on that. So what for many might have seemed completely implausible. No, he wouldn't possibly deceive the American people on something as big as that. Now they've got to look at this again. Why wouldn't he possibly deceive the American people on something that big if he was willing to deceive them on something as big as their health policy, what is most dear to them individually? And I want to point out an article that I read in recent months by Wayne Allen Root. He's a frequent contributor to Fox News. He's written this article in particular for The Blaze. And it's called Obama is 100% Red, White, and Blue American Born. Now, Mr. Wayne Allen Root, he doesn't agree that the long-form certificate is a fraud. He doesn't think that it's a fraud. He thinks that it's legitimate. But he still says this, and this is what I want to draw everybody's attention to. He says we should look very carefully at the president's college records. Now, all of you know that the president, unlike his predecessors, other presidents have revealed their college records, have revealed their medical records. But so much of this man he has kept carefully guarded. And one of the things that he has not revealed are his transcripts, his transcripts at Cambridge, at Occidental College, and even at Harvard. And what this individual, Mr. Root, asks is, take a look. If we could possibly get a hold of those college transcripts, we would discover something. Is it not possible that this man lied, that he was actually born in America, but that he pretended to be foreign-born in order to enter prestigious colleges? Even by Barack Obama's own admission, he had very poor grades in high school, and yet he became a member of Columbia University. Well, how did he get in, asks Mr. Root. Columbia University has a policy whereby they do allow a few exceptional individuals, exceptional foreigners in, if they believe that that individual has promise. And it occurs to Mr. Root that perhaps President Barack Obama lied at the time and made up a story about himself, saying that he was foreign-born so that he could get entry into Columbia University, that proved to be his ticket into the Ivy League. And Mr. Root argues that he then continued with that lie because it proved to be a very good way to succeed. He continued to lie throughout his academic career, even at Harvard Law School, continuing to insist that he was foreign when, according to Mr. Root, he was probably born in America. And he asks this question, is it not possible that he lied because he discovered that to create an exotic identity for himself, that would distinguish himself, that would give him an entry into a world where his real identity would never have given him access to? So he asks us to ponder this very question and to look at the track record. We know that Barack Obama stated to his publisher that he was born in Kenya. So we know that Barack Obama lied for years. He peddled the idea that he was born in Kenya when it suited him to peddle this notion that he was exotic, that he was foreign, that gave him a unique identity and a unique perspective into American life. And it's part of that unique mixture, his unique heritage, that he kept riding this uniqueness into political office. And then, according to Mr. Root, what happened was he became so popular, he achieved beyond his wildest dreams, that he was even asked to run for the highest office in the land, being President of the United States. He did so, he won, and then the lie that he had peddled in order to rise, that he was foreign born, he was caught in that lie. So Mr. Root posits that this president is a complete fraud, but for the very opposite of what those who question the birth certificate have said. Not that he wasn't born in the U.S., but that he was born in the U.S., but that he created this fantastical identity about himself in order to have access to a world that he would never have access to have access to education he would never have access to have access to, in essence, the highest levers of power. Now, what does all this amount to? It amounts to the persistent questions about the president's past. And who is it that is responsible for those questions not going away? It's not just Lieutenant Zullo that is asking those questions. Those questions keep resurfacing every couple of months. Somebody else asks the question because they see something in his past that doesn't jive with a narrative that he said, with a statement that he said. This whole path of lies is constantly being unfolded. This week, another lie was has been revealed. The president had previously said that he never lived with his uncle Omar, who is an illegal immigrant, and now Jay Carney has had to admit that, oh, yes, actually, he did live with his uncle at one time. The president was never asked directly whether he had, according to Jay Carney, lived with his uncle, but he did live with his uncle who was an illegal immigrant. Yes. Now they're fessing up to it because his uncle has said that Barack Obama lived with him. And he said so in his deportation hearing. So you see, what does all of this amount to? It amounts to a past that remains murky, an identity that is still unknown, a path of lies that is constantly being unfolded. And who is responsible for that? Well, it is the president himself. For 13 years, his publishers published a biography saying that he was born in Kenya. And now we have to go further and ask this question. It's not just the birth certificate that has been scrutinized, rightfully so, that has been shown to be a fabrication. We should all press, in light of all of this murkiness, in light of this pattern of lies, we want to see those college transcripts, because some huge fraud has been perpetrated on the American public, one way or the other. Either this president presented a fraudulent biography in order to have access to elite institutions he otherwise wouldn't have access to, or he presented a fraudulent birth certificate in order to actually lead this country. Either way, a huge fraud has been perpetrated on the American public, and we need to get to the bottom of it. You are listening to Dr. Grace, upholding values that will never, ever die.
Tonight, well, we're all in the mood for a melody, and you got us feeling all right.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Welcome back to American Heartland with Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. Many of you probably heard that the president and the first lady sat down with Barbara Walters recently for a special interview on ABC News. And most of the media just played a small clip of that interview. What they played was a segment of Barbara Walters asking the president and the first lady whether or not they would stay in Washington even after the end of his second term. And they said that they might, because one of their daughters is in high school. She won't quite be finished high school then, so she'll have a very big role to play. She'll have a very big say in that final decision as to whether or not they're going to stay in D.C. That, however, folks, is not the important aspect of this interview. I was intrigued. I listened to the whole thing, and I was absolutely flabbergasted by the interview, and I'll tell you why. And if you saw it, you probably saw everything that I saw, and if you hadn't seen it, you're going to love this segment. What we see here is one of the most embarrassing interviews of a sitting president I have ever seen in my life. Barbara Walters, this is a woman who, honestly, when I think Barbara Walters, I think shameless. This woman has no shame whatsoever. She will ask anybody any question at any time about anything. If you know her, you know what I'm talking about. She will ask the most indiscreet questions. If a star is in the throes of scandal, she'll go right to it and keep pressing, usually until that person breaks down in tears or something like that. And she'll pretend to be very sympathetic, but she keeps drilling and drilling and drilling until she gets what she wants. Well, in this specific interview, she completely humiliates and embarrasses the president and the first lady. You're going to hear it in the audio clips. But if you really want to know what I'm talking about, go on YouTube and look at this interview and look at their facial expressions at the questions that she asks. The president and the first lady thought, well, you know what? We're going to do this lovey-dovey interview. We're going to try to recreate that magic with our audience. We're going to try to show the likable part of ourselves. We're going to try to show the American public, that we're human, but we have many redeeming features. So they thought by doing this interview, they were going to soften public opinion in their favor, given the disastrous rollout of Obamacare. Instead, this interview makes the president and first lady look like a laughingstock. And I winced several times as I watched this. Let me tell you what I mean. Well, first of all, Barbara Walters asks, how do they feel now that the public boos at them in public places? Roll it, Brittany.
That by now you both have fairly thick skins, but when you hear your husband being booed, the president, at a recent basketball game, how do you feel?
It's part of being president of the United States of America.
So it doesn't get to you?
It's part of the job. I don't really know what more to say, Barbara, except it's a hard job. I am fortunate to be living with a man who has a long view of this job, who understands that in the case of healthcare, that this is all about the folks who don't have insurance, the folks that he sees every single day.
This is a man you love, some people.
I do. I love
she
you.
Does.
This is
I think that, that's all, it's plain and simple as that, Barbara. I love this man. He's working hard. He's doing the best he can, and he's doing a phenomenal job.
Professions of love between the First Lady and the President of the United States really have no place here. They should not be issued, in my view, because you have to retain an aura of professionalism. This is a job. This is a function that you have. So I thought when she went down that path that the First Lady made a very bad mistake. She should be showing her support for him, yes, indeed, but saying, oh, I love you, I really do. I thought that was pretty silly. But the key point of this, though, is Barbara Walters' question. She's basically saying, how do you feel when the public boos at you nowadays? And they say, oh, well, it's just part of the job. It's part of the job. Excuse me, they were cheering for you before everywhere you went. They are now booing. They're booing at a sporting event, for crying out loud. It's not any political event. It's a sporting event where you have a wide swath of the American people and they're booing. What she's really saying is, hey, guys, how are you reacting to the fact that the public is going sour on you? And Michelle Obama does the best she can do to try to deflect attention from what Barbara Walters is really saying. Barbara Walters is saying, hey, the public used to cheer for you. They're booing right now. What do you guys have to say for yourselves? And you can tell by her very fake laughing that she really wasn't buying any of the comments that they were making in response to that. She was actually really digging at them. And then it gets worse. Roll it, Brittany.
It's hard to sit opposite you, Mr. President, and say this, but a lot of the criticism is personal. People just don't think you're trustworthy.
Well, I don't think that's true, Barbara. The truth of the matter is that I got reelected in part because people did think I was trustworthy and they knew I was working on their behalf. I think the bottom line is, Barbara, that I don't know any president who hasn't gone through certain periods during their presidency. Maybe George Washington might be the exception.
I remember I interviewed him.
Well, he probably would have told you, if that were true, that there are going to be moments where things aren't going as smoothly as you want. Very rarely are the good things that happen get the same attention as the things that aren't working as well.
Well, what a defensive Barack Obama. You know, usually he's so arrogant, so full of himself, so much on the offense against the evil Republicans or the evil Tea Party, quote unquote, or the extremists in the country. And here he was, kind of mealy-mouthed. But what's really interesting is Barbara Walters' question. She's looking at him, and if you see the audio tape, you'll know what I mean. She's looking at him, she's kind of wincing, and she's saying, I really don't know how to say this, but isn't a lot of this criticism personal? And what she's saying is, let me translate it for all you folks out there. The public believes you're a liar, sir, and you deserve the declining poll numbers because nobody believes a freaking word that is coming out of your mouth anymore. That's what Barbara Walters is really saying to the President of the United States. This is personal. And she's also saying, haven't you brought a lot of this on yourself? Basically, your own words are leading to people booing you in public and your complete loss of credibility. And, Barbara Walters isn't done. She then asks him not to talk anymore about himself or about the First Lady or about their policies or anything else. She starts to talk about who's coming next, about his successor. And we're only a year into the second term of Barack Obama. Roll it, Brittany.
The president is 1 year into his second term, but there are already questions about who his successor might be. Mr. President, people say it's time for a female president. Do you agree?
Well, I think that we have some amazing female public servants all across the country, and there is no doubt that sometime very soon we're going to have a female president, and I'm confident that she will do a great job.
Well, let me translate this one for all of you. Mr. President, you're a lame duck. And so now we really can't talk about the rest of your term because what is there to say? You're completely powerless. You've been unmasked in front of the American people. So she says, people are talking about your successor. Well, who's talking about his successor? She is. She wants to raise it. And then she really sticks the knife into him. Is it possible that your successor might be a woman? And what she's also implying is, and that woman is probably going to do a heck of a better job than you, sir. And, if you follow the Democratic primary in 2008, you know that a lot of women in her age group were rooting for Hillary Clinton. So right now, she's got a snarky little attitude, thinking, I was one of those folks that probably supported Hillary Clinton, and we got stuck with you, and look at the disaster you turned out to be. So here, I'm going to stick the knife in really deep and talk about the person you ousted, but the person who should have been president and who would have been doing a heck of a better job than you by now. That's really what that question was all about. And he, the president and the First Lady, continue to grimace every step of the way. Gee, this isn't the Barbara Walters they expected. They expected, a lot more puff from her, not this constant needling and jabbing and implying that the president is so completely incompetent the nation made a huge mistake in electing him. Well, now for the coup de grace, the question that absolutely flabbergasted me. Well, I'll let you hear it for yourself. Roll it, Brittany.
Do you think that the First Lady might have made a better president than you?
Of course. That's an easy question. But she's smart enough to know that she might not want to go through the process.
I absolutely don't agree. He has a level of patience and focus and tenacity and calm, that just doesn't, come by.
You don't have that patience.
I definitely don't.
Well, I have to say that is an incredible question, because she is saying, do you think that the First Lady, who basically has no qualifications whatsoever for political office, she's had not even a scintilla of a political career, Michelle Obama, would she perhaps have been better than you? Meaning, let me translate, you have been such a disaster that perhaps even your wife, who has no experience whatsoever, might have done a better job of it than you. That is an incredibly embarrassing question. And you see Michelle Obama rallying to her husband's defense, trying to say, oh, no. I mean, he covers up by saying, oh, yes, she would have been formidable. But even he was really taken aback by the question. Michelle Obama tries to come to his rescue. And notice Michelle Obama's response. She says, oh, no, I wouldn't be that good, blah, blah, blah. But she doesn't say, look at what my man has achieved. He did X, Y, and Z. I mean, if somebody asks me about my husband, apart from his remarkable personal qualities, what do you have to say in defense of his public career? I mean, I'll rattle off a whole bunch of his achievements. And the only thing she says is, well, he's patient, he's tenacious. So she lists these vague qualities, personal qualities, but she doesn't applaud his actual achievements. And so there you have it. Barbara Walters sticking the knife in when the president and the first lady are at a low point and embarrassing them far worse than I have ever seen any first lady and president embarrassed in a public interview. You are listening to Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com, upholding values that will never die.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Welcome back to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. I am the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. And many of you probably recognize that song. That's Joe Cocker. You can leave your hat on. You know, if you're part of my generation, you probably remember a scene in 9.5 Weeks. It was a movie that starred Kim Basinger and Mickey Rourke. It was considered very racy at the time, very steamy. That's a scene where, she starts to undress. But, she doesn't really undress in that scene. It's just some sexy music in the background. Well, there are a couple of scenes there that if you look at it now, you would say, I really don't know what all the controversy was about. This brings me to a point I'm going to make. Every couple of years, we sink a little bit lower, and then we look back on a previous movie that used to be controversial, and we go back and see it, and it seems like nothing compared to today. And we keep saying that again and again and again, which shows you how far we continue to descend. Well, In the news now, it appears that one of the great leading men of our time, Leonardo DiCaprio, is engaging or has engaged in an extremely graphic sex scene in a movie that is going to come out soon. That movie is called The Wolf of Wall Street. It's directed by Martin Scorsese, and it is the true story of the rise and fall of a Wall Street tycoon by the name of Jordan Belfort. In reality, that movie shows how this man rose to success and then how he spent his money in a very reckless manner and then got in trouble with the law. Apparently, it's produced in the same way that Casino was, with a voiceover, because Mr. Belfort has given detailed description of his lifestyle. Well, this is making news now because apparently Leonardo DiCaprio in this movie performs a really graphic, and I'm not going to go into detail, but a kind of sex scene that is not the typical sex scene that a leading man does. So I will just let you Google it and see what it is that goes on, but it's graphic and it's pretty disgusting. But it's actually leading the news because, well, Leonardo DiCaprio, who generally is known as a very good actor overall. Yes, he's a ladies' man. Yes, he's touted as a handsome man, but he's also known as a very good actor. He's actually going down the road in this movie of graphic sexuality that, if I were advising him, I would say you really don't need to do that. You really shouldn't do that for a man of your stature in terms of your career. But anyways, what's the point here? The point is another leading man is doing that, and this particular movie is full of graphic sex scenes. There are orgies that are depicted, orgies on planes, orgies everywhere. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff here. It's not a porno. It's some kind of documentary, remember. But it's really quite vivid. And men, actors who are generally respectable, are shown in the nude, including Jonah Hill, apparently. There's a scene where you get full frontal male nudity in this movie. Now, why am I talking about it? I'm talking about it because I'm the editor of culture as well as politics at worldtribune.com. And one of my beats is to chronicle and discuss and attack and address our constant declining standards. Now, most of us are used to female nudity. We've seen so much of it, even in a movie where it's not called for, that we've begun, most of us, to even ignore it. What used to be shocking decades ago is no longer shocking. Men, however, in many movies, have pretty much kept their clothes on, right? Unless they're doing some kind of action scene where we're supposed to see their muscles, etc. For the most part, men have not been objectified in the very same way that women have, at least not yet. But this movie and others are going further than ever before. What have we started to see with the male body? Well, occasionally in movies you'll see the nudity from the back. And now we're starting to see frontal nudity. And this is another barrier that we are crossing. And we are crossing it without too much of a peep. At the very same time, you have Lady Gaga on the cover of a magazine with full frontal nudity. This is unacceptable. We are descending down the same path that the Europeans have gone. I went on a trip to Italy as a young girl, and at the dinner table, my family asked me, "What do you guys think of our society? What have you seen? What do you think?" I turned to my aunt who asked me that question, and I said, "I'm sorry to say this, but this society is extremely vulgar." And she looked at me all shocked. "What do you mean? What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I went to the newsstand just to get a newspaper, and there were all these magazines with full frontal nude images that I don't see in my country." I said, "In my country, those magazines," this was several decades ago, I said, "those magazines are hidden from view. But in Italy here, they're everywhere." She looked astonished that I would call that vulgar. I had another experience when I went to England doing my doctoral dissertation where you had full frontal nudity almost everywhere. You went to make a phone call in a phone booth. You not only had nude images in a phone booth, but you had a little advertising saying, if you want to engage in sexual activity with a young girl as fresh as 18, call this number. So you had the actual solicitation of sex even in phone booths. The point is that in Europe, a lot of this is completely unregulated and it's rampant. It's everywhere. In America, we have until now had higher standards. This is a country, at its very foundation, it was supposed to be the city upon a hill, the country that upholds standards when decadent Europeans let go of those standards. Well, we know the Europeans have abandoned their Christian heritage whole hog, and yet we in America have held firm to that heritage. And even as we've started to slip from it, we've tried to uphold some of the public standards of decency. Well, not so anymore. It's very difficult nowadays to watch TV without being offended at something or other. A few nights ago, my husband and I were watching a program on HBO. We thought we were going to be watching a historical drama on the Roman Empire. And before you know it, there were some scenes of full frontal male nudity. So we immediately changed the channel. And we are going to cancel our subscription to all of those movie channels that come with the DirecTV package we currently have. We don't want to just stumble upon this stuff that offends our sensibility. Now, some of you out there are probably saying, there she goes again. She's preachy, she's prudish, blah, blah, blah. I am none of the above. I am concerned about our youth, and I'll tell you why. The more you degrade the human body, and the more you render sexuality just unimportant, the more you spread it everywhere, what does it do? What is the overall effect of all this? Is the overall effect of this that, we all have better sex lives than we ever did before? No, I'm sorry, that's not true. Is the overall effect of this that we all have more sex than ever before? Oh no, all the statistics show that that's not true. So all of this vivid, graphic display of sexuality, what is the ultimate goal? Are we really there to try to make people happier in their sexual lives? No. You know what the end goal of all this is? The end goal of all this is to destroy love. Is to destroy the possibility that a man and a woman can find one another and know true, eternal, and lasting love. In fact, if you ask most young people on the street, do you think you're going to find true love in your life? They're going to say, I don't think so. Does it even exist? Most of them will ask you. Why are they so cynical? Well, it's because they see so many of their counterparts engaging in promiscuous sex, not being loyal to anybody. And the more we do not inculcate in our youth the ability to be disciplined with your body, the more we lose the knowledge that there is such a thing as true, eternal, romantic love. You know, every generation has, at least in the movies, a great love story. You know, I saw this amazing love story in the movies, and it's this movie, and this is my favorite movie love story. I wonder if you ask the typical youth in the street, what's your favorite movie love story? Would they even know what it is? I can't remember the last time that I saw a scene in a movie that conveyed true passion. You see, all of this nudity ultimately destroys not only romantic love, but passion and the ability to depict true passion. And what is the ultimate goal of all of this? Well, if you destroy romantic love, you destroy the ability for a man and a woman to remain in a loving relationship for decades upon decades. As we're seeing, we can't keep a marriage together anymore. And what happens when you can't keep a marriage together? You cannot transmit your heritage to the next generation. In particular, when marriages collapse, religion collapses with it. Marriage is the primary conduit of religious education and training to the young. When marriage collapses, Christianity collapses. When you fail to uphold romantic love, you therefore are basically sticking a dagger into the heart of marriage. And as you do that, you are sticking a dagger into Christianity. In fact, if you ask me this question, how can I ensure if I'm evil? How can I ensure that Christianity is not transmitted to the youth? I would say turn everybody into a lustful creature. Because once they're lustful, they can't stay married. And if they can't stay married, they can't transmit Christianity to the youth. And that's what's really going on. This is Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com, upholding values that will never, ever die.
Well, if you ask me where I come from, here's what I tell everyone. I was born.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.